never imagined something like this could happen at my job. I've been working as a night shift nurse for almost 10 years, accustomed to the hospital's silence, the fatigue of late hours, and the faint movements in dark corridors. But what happened that night left an impression I still can't comprehend. Since that moment, I think twice before starting my night rounds, and I can no longer look at bed number 12 the same way. That night was unusually slow. No emergency cases, just a few fevers and mild symptoms. When the place gets this quiet, it becomes unsettling, as if something strange is about to happen. I decided to start my usual round at 10 p.m., checking the rooms and casually speaking with some patients. Everything was calm until I passed room 20, where bed number 12 was located. Bed number 12 was rarely occupied, so I felt an odd sensation as I approached it. It was as if an invisible force was pulling me toward the room. When I entered, I saw a man lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. His skin was pale, his expression reflecting a strange emotion I couldn't put into words. At first, I assumed he was a new patient admitted while I was busy elsewhere in the hospital, which wouldn't be unusual. But his unwavering gaze made me feel something wasn't right. I approached him and asked for his name, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring at the ceiling as if I wasn't even there. I stayed for a while, trying to get any reaction from him, and finally, he slowly closed his eyes, as though I was just another piece of furniture in the room. At that moment, I thought he might be under the influence of a strong sedative. I decided to check his medical file, but I couldn't find anything beside the bed or in the corridor. I went to the nurse's station to search the system, but there was no record of any new patient in room 20. Confused, I tried convincing myself it was just a system error. I asked my colleague, but she gave me a puzzled look and said she hadn't seen anyone enter the room. I returned to room 20, and everything appeared as it had been before, except bed number 12 was neatly made, as if no one had been lying there. The room also felt colder than usual. I went back to the station, trying to make sense of what had happened, but I felt increasingly uneasy. At that moment, one of the senior nurses quietly approached me, speaking in a hushed tone, as though she didn't want anyone else to hear. Years ago, a man died in bed number 12 due to medical negligence, something no one talks about. She added that some believed his spirit never left the hospital, as if he was stuck, waiting for justice that never came. From that moment on, her words lingered in my mind all night. I knew no one else would believe me if I told the story, but I only felt at ease when my shift ended and I left the hospital. Even now, sometimes, when I'm alone in the hospital, I sense that presence, an invisible figure still waiting for something. At Santo Tomas Hospital in Mexico City, one of the oldest and largest hospitals in the region, there worked a nurse named Ololaya Cruz. Having spent more than 20 years at the hospital, Ololaya was well known to everyone. She worked in the emergency department, the busiest area in the hospital, caring for accident victims and critical cases. Her kind spirit and extraordinary attention to detail made her a favorite among patients and colleagues alike. One winter night, during a severe cold snap, tragedy struck Ololaya on her way to her night shift. She lost her footing on the icy road and was hit by a speeding car. Despite the best efforts of the hospital's doctors to save her, she took her last breath in the same emergency room where she had devoted so many years of her life. After her death, Strange occurrences began to happen within the hospital. Staff and patients alike reported unexplained phenomena. Some claimed they saw a nurse in an old uniform moving through the misty hallways at night. What was most intriguing was that this nurse wasn't just a fleeting apparition. She actively helped, just as she had in life, delivering medication, preparing beds, and easing patients' pain, as if she were still on duty. The most chilling incident involved a patient named Juan, who was in a critical condition in the very department Ololaya once worked in. As his health deteriorated, Juan claimed he heard the sound of approaching footsteps and felt a sudden warmth enveloping him. When he looked up, he saw a nurse standing beside his bed, preparing medications and guiding him toward comfort. Shortly after, Juan passed away, swearing that Ololaya had been the one who cared for him in his final moments. Many other patients shared similar stories, describing encounters with her near the end of their lives. They often reported seeing her as a transparent figure, emitting a faint glow, wandering the hallways and appearing to those in desperate need of help before vanishing without a trace. Following these incidents, the hospital staff began referring to her as La Enfermera Fantasma, the ghost nurse. New nurses like Maria and Elena even reported seeing her during their night shifts in the emergency department. They described her standing silently by patients' beds, assisting in their care or ensuring their comfort before disappearing as suddenly as she arrived. The story spread quickly, with everyone at the hospital talking about these eerie but comforting encounters. While some dismissed the tales as mere imagination, the result of stress and exhaustion, others were convinced that Ololaya's spirit lingered because of her deep love for her work and her desire to continue helping others. Even years after her death, the name Ololaya Cruz remained etched in the minds of everyone who worked at Santo Tomas Hospital. Whether her presence was the result of a restless soul or collective hallucination, one thing was certain. Ololaya Cruz left behind more than just memories. She left a ghost that could not be ignored. If you are here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. At Beaver Creek Hospital in Kentucky, Nurse Jessica Miller worked in the burn unit. Though the hospital was relatively new, its reputation for treating severe burns made it a sought-after facility in the region. Jessica was a recent graduate, and her work in the burn unit was a true test of her skills. She cared for each patient personally, always striving to give them hope, even when recovery seemed impossible. One cold winter day, the hospital received a shocking case that made Jessica's heart race. A 6-year-old boy named Marcus was brought into the emergency room in critical condition after suffering severe burns across most of his body. His wounds were so deep that his face was completely covered in bandages. As Marcus groaned in pain, Jessica worked tirelessly to stabilize him and prepare the necessary treatments. When Jessica inquired about Marcus's case, a doctor revealed the horrifying truth. The boy had been brutally tortured by his stepmother. It was the first time Jessica had encountered such a case, and the details shook her to her core. A woman torturing an innocent child. The reality was more horrifying than she could have imagined. Marcus had been subjected to unimaginable cruelty. His stepmother had punished him in the most vicious ways, including immersing him in scalding water and leaving him under the scorching sun for hours. When the police arrived at the home, they discovered that the burns on his body were the result of deliberate and calculated acts. What unsettled Jessica the most was Marcus's behavior. Despite the excruciating pain he endured, he always smiled at her whenever she approached him. Jessica felt there was something strange about his smile, as if he carried a dark secret. Weeks of intensive treatment followed, and strange occurrences began to take place in the burn unit. Objects moved inexplicably, lights flickered, and eerie sounds echoed from shadowy corners of the ward. One night, as Jessica watched over Marcus, she noticed something extraordinary. While the boy slept, his wounds began to change. They seemed to be healing slowly, but at the same time, they morphed into something far more sinister. It was as if his body was transforming in ways that defied logic. Jessica couldn't believe her eyes, and with each passing day, her unease grew. Marcus's strange smile persisted, leaving her with the unnerving feeling that something unnatural was happening. One night, as Jessica approached Marcus's bed to tend to him, she suddenly felt something cold touch the back of her neck. Startled, she turned around, but the room was empty except for the sleeping boy. Yet, a foul, ominous smell filled the air. The following morning, after Marcus had passed the critical stage, Jessica decided to investigate further. She contacted the police, who revisited the case and interrogated the stepmother. To their shock, the woman had mysteriously disappeared. The investigation suggested something inexplicable had occurred following the incident, something potentially tied to the prolonged torture Marcus had endured. Days later, the strange incidents in the hospital ceased. Over time, Jessica realized that Marcus had been discharged and was no longer in the ward. Yet, his unsettling smile lingered in her memory. It was as if something dark had taken root in the hospital, casting a shadow that refused to lift. Jessica came to believe that the burns Marcus suffered were not just physical injuries, but carried with them a malevolent force far darker than human cruelty. At Riverside Hospital in Charlotte, Ellen worked as a nurse in the emergency department. She was young, ambitious, and freshly graduated, still trying to find her place among her colleagues. Her shift that night began at 2 a.m. The hospital was unusually quiet, as it often was in the late-night hours. That night, an unusual case arrived, one Ellen had never encountered before. A 50-year-old woman named Mary had been admitted with severe burns, though her condition was beginning to stabilize. Despite the pain etched on her face, Mary's eyes radiated fear. Ellen took charge of her care, but there was something unsettling about Mary's gaze, almost as if she was issuing a warning. Mary insisted that the curtains in her room stay closed at all times. She kept repeating a peculiar phrase to every nurse who entered. "Don't look at the ceiling." Ellen was puzzled. The ceiling appeared perfectly normal, plain, white, and unremarkable. As the hours passed, Ellen began to sense something strange in the room. Faint noises started to emanate from the walls, a soft shuffling sound, like something moving just beyond sight. When Ellen approached Mary's bed to tend to her, an overwhelming weight seemed to press on her chest. It was then she realized there was something in the room, something beyond explanation. At that moment, Mary looked at Ellen with a pale smile and whispered, "It's finally come down." Ellen grabbed Mary's arm, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" But Mary gave no answer. She slipped into a deep sleep, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, where a faint shifting shadow began to appear. Ellen's gaze followed Mary's, and she froze. A shadowy form was taking shape on the ceiling, hazy and indistinct, but undeniably there. It seemed to be moving closer, almost imperceptibly, as though it were watching her. The next few moments felt like a nightmare. The lights in the room flickered and then went out, plunging the space into darkness. Ellen felt something cold and heavy brush against her neck, an unseen presence creeping closer. When she dared to glance at the ceiling again, the shadow was gone. By morning, Mary had passed away in her bed, with no clear cause of death. A small smear of blood had appeared on the ceiling above her, as though something had descended from above. The curtains, which Mary had insisted remain closed, were shredded, and the ceiling itself bore faint, unexplainable marks. Days went by, and Ellen returned to her shifts at the hospital. But that night stayed with her. Every time she passed Mary's former room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from above. And those words, "It's finally come down," echoed in her mind. One day, Ellen uncovered a disturbing truth. Riverside Hospital had been built on land with a dark history. Old police reports revealed a series of mysterious incidents in the area: patients disappearing, strange noises heard in the dead of night. The hospital, it seemed, was a place where sinister forces lingered. The ceiling wasn't just a ceiling. It was a gateway to something ancient and malevolent. The shadow that had appeared wasn't a trick of the light. It was something timeless, a predator feeding on the souls of the hospital's patients. Ellen couldn't bear to stay at Riverside after that. Before she left the hospital for good, she discovered that Mary wasn't the only victim. Many patients before her had encountered the same shadow, and many had met the same fate. It was as though the hospital itself had become a silent predator, consuming lives under the guise of care. And Ellen knew that the shadow on the ceiling would remain, waiting for its next victim. This is a story shared with me by a nurse who used to work at a nursing home in a small town in Arizona. The nursing home had 2 wings, connected by a hallway. Compared to the front wing, the back wing always seemed heavy with mystery, perhaps even frightening at times. It's hard to explain, but it carried an unmistakably somber atmosphere. For that reason, nurses often avoided staying in the back wing. After the residents had gone to bed and the final nightly rounds were done, they would move to the nurses' station in the front wing. This routine went on for several nights until the administration discovered it. Concerned about safety, they issued strict orders for the nurses to remain in their assigned workstations in the back wing. Yet strange things continued to happen. These incidents were often dismissed as hallucinations caused by the exhaustion of overworked staff. However, there was one particular incident, so terrifying and witnessed by multiple people, that left no room for doubt. There was a resident named Mr. Santiago Morales, rumored to have practiced black magic or brujeria during his lifetime. Late at night, according to reports from other residents, Mr. Morales would slither into their rooms like a serpent born from hell. He would crawl on his belly, with his arms stiff at his sides, his eyes rolled back, and his tongue darting in and out like a human snake. He would creep under their beds and try to pull them down. "He's the devil," the other residents would say. But their reports weren't taken seriously. How could a frail old man, who needed assistance from nurses just to get out of bed, possibly be capable of such things? Everyone dismissed these stories as the confused imaginations of elderly residents. But on one terrifying night, the staff became believers in the dark force that resided within Mr. Santiago Morales. It was past midnight. The residents were asleep, and the hallways were silent. The nurses had gathered in the back lounge, waiting for morning to come. Most of them were about to doze off when a blood-curdling noise shattered the stillness. One nurse stood frozen, her face pale with terror, and pointed down the hallway, leading to the residents' rooms. When the others turned to look, they saw a horrifying sight. Mr. Morales was crawling on his belly, heading toward one of the rooms. The nurses were paralyzed, unable to move. When he entered the room, they were certain the chilling stories were true. Mr. Morales slithered like a snake, his eyes rolled back, his tongue flicking as though he were a cursed creature. A few days later, Mr. Santiago Morales passed away. As the nurses prepared his body, they heard loud banging on the window. When they pulled back the curtains, they saw a large owl, called a lechuza in Spanish, trying to get in. Birds circled the room where Mr. Morales lay, as if waiting to claim his soul. This story is just one of many that make people believe in the unexplainable. My name is Rebecca Collins, and I'm an emergency room nurse at Palm Hills Medical Center in Mississippi. My job isn't easy, but it means the world to me. Our hospital is located in a busy area, and we're the only Level 2 trauma center in the region. This means we're the first to handle critical emergencies before transferring them elsewhere if needed. The hardest cases for me are always the ones involving children. Children are my favorite patients when they come in with something minor that we can easily treat. But when they're severely ill or in critical condition, it feels like my entire world is crumbling. I'll never forget the day a 3-year-old boy came to us after drowning in a pool. We managed to restart his heartbeat, but we knew he had suffered brain death. That moment has stayed with me ever since. There was also the case of a 17-year-old boy who had been shot in the chest. He came into the ER talking to us, and we did everything we could. We inserted a chest tube to drain the blood, but suddenly, his heart stopped. We had to open his chest manually and pump his heart directly. We were able to stabilize him temporarily and rushed him to surgery, but unfortunately, he didn't make it. That was a devastating loss for all of us, especially since one of my colleagues knew him personally. Sometimes, I push myself to the limit. I remember one time while training a new nurse, we had just finished handling a tough emergency, and I completely broke down. One of my coworkers pulled me into the restroom and said, "Breathe, calm down, you're strong." That moment taught me so much about the importance of supporting each other. The challenges aren't just medical. We also have to deal with aggressive patients at times. I remember one particularly combative patient. I heard my colleague calling for help, so I dropped everything and ran to her. I found a technician trying to restrain the patient, so I climbed onto the bed to hold his legs. It might sound extreme, but in moments like those, we have to act fast to protect everyone. Despite all the hardships, I work with an amazing team of nurses. We support each other through everything. Sometimes I think to myself, if it weren't for these incredible people, I wouldn't be able to come back to work every day.